Are you at a big company that brags to still think like a startup, but you think maybe that's an excuse to understaff every team? Or maybe you're at a small, established company that doesn't want to ruin its friendly culture. So instead, you have chaos, and engineering delivers products years late that manufacturing can't build, sales can't sell, and support has no idea how to fix. Maybe what your company needs is to grow up. In this video, I'll be discussing how to build a company that can define, design, and deploy a physical product. Imagine you have an idea for a physical product that you want to sell, and you want to build a company around this idea. Here, I'm going to give you some advice on how to do that and what you'll need to concern yourself with along the way. There are areas like finance and legal that I won't cover at all. But the goal here is not to create a checklist, but to help you develop a way of thinking so you can ask yourself, is this an area where I need to mature my company? Throughout this video, I'll be assuming that the development is done using adaptive project management, which is an approach that uses waterfall tools with an agile mindset to solve problems that have complexity and uncertainty, and it's described in my first video. I highly recommend you watch that first and then return here. The link is shown above and is in this video's description. Lots of companies want to maintain the feel of a startup as they grow. It's exciting and everyone is learning a lot, but it's also very stressful. At any moment, the whole thing may come tumbling down. One person leaves and no one knows what they knew. Simple tasks are complicated because there are no instructions on the right way to do them. And the list goes on. The key is to grow the maturity of your company along with the maturity of the product. What worked when you were 20 people doesn't work when you're 60. But you don't want to become like a Fortune 500 company either. The key is to right-size your processes and tools as you grow. To paraphrase Einstein, keep things as simple as possible, but no simpler than that. In the table above, you see a summary of the journey of a company developing an innovative physical product. The chapters of this journey are define, design, and deploy. The first 4 lines of the table describe the company at the different stages, though the reality of any given company might be very different depending on the complexity of the product and the outsourcing model. The best way to tell what chapter you're in is to ask yourself if I'm defining what the product is and the theory of operation of my solution, or I'm designing a product based on my definition, or I'm deploying the concept by scaling manufacturing, sales, and support. Issues like communication and documentation are easy when you're small and not shipping products, but you need to build your foundation. I've identified 5 areas that should mature as the company grows: focus, process, outsourcing, communication, and documentation. I don't mean to imply that this list is complete, but I think they provide a good example of how companies should mature. I'm calling the first chapter Define, as you're focused on defining the problem and solution. Looking at a sample 6-phase project for adaptive project management, during the first 3 phases, you're focused on reducing uncertainty and risk, and this makes up the Define chapter. By the end of the chapter, you should have a fairly solid user requirements specification, a URS, and confidence that you understand the technology and it can meet your customers' needs. During the Define chapter, your focus should be on understanding what your customers want and documenting it in a user requirements specification, a URS, and developing the technology needed to meet their needs. When possible, you should protect your intellectual property with patents. Finally, you need to focus on building the team that will be there through the challenges coming ahead to ship a product. Process should be kept to a minimum, but that doesn't mean you have no process at all. Some areas like HR and accounting have legal requirements for process. And follow the uncertainty and risk process described in my adaptive project management video. Again, the link is above. Your challenges are large and your team is small. So being smart about outsourcing is critical. If something is not part of your secret sauce and you can easily outsource it, then do. There are services that will manage HR, payroll, legal, even designing and building prototypes. For every task you should ask, can I do this and should I do this? As much as possible, keep your secret sauce and your core competencies internal. If you do decide to outsource a critical aspect of your product, keep them close. For instance, if you're outsourcing software, then make sure you have an engaged product owner who can guide the external team and make sure they're building what you want. All communications with external teams should be documented, probably with published meeting minutes. There are some companies that take outsourcing to an extreme. They raise funds and hire service providers to do everything. Their headcount might get up to 5 people, but that's about it. They aren't growing a company, just a product. And this video is not for them. When you're small and all working together, you can rely on informal communication. Everyone will be working on a few projects and you'll see each other every day, so information will easily get to everywhere it needs to be. But if you're working remotely, you can't rely on informal communication and will need to develop tools that aid the dissemination of information. I suggest you implement a PM platform and use that to assign tasks, and all communication around that task will be captured there. I'd also implement a wiki like Confluence or Notion to capture higher level information like the URS and design descriptions. You will need both eventually anyway, so you're just moving early because of the remote nature of the team. Set up informal meetings online for people to have water cooler conversations over Zoom or other avenues for informal communication to happen in the absence of chatting while making coffee or overhearing something that ends up being important. During this chapter, you don't need much documentation, but you should have an uncertainty and risk registers and a URS. These documents should be updated regularly. If a risk occurs to someone on their commute to work, then they should add it to the risk registry when they get to the office. Also, publish meeting minutes, especially when decisions are made or you're meeting with outside partners. I'm calling this second chapter Design, as you're focused on designing the solution. Looking at the sample 6-phase project for adaptive project management, phases 4 and 5 are where you're focused on developing the solution. By the end of this chapter, you should have a solid design and have started building up your manufacturing capability. It's important to understand that these phases are not necessarily of equal duration. What drives the length of the phase is the need to check in at a gate. When you have lots of uncertainty and risks, you need to check in more often. The duration of the later phases are driven by the need to increase investment, especially as you ramp up production. For the design chapter, our focus is designing the product. This is straightforward because we resolved all the hard questions like what does the customer want and will this work in the define chapter. We will also need to start to build sales, support, and manufacturing, but just a skeleton at this point. Late in this chapter, we'll also be testing. And I don't mean testing to prove that it works, but testing that it's reliable and robust. If you're going to put it in a home, ask yourself, how could a toddler break it? Remember the red ring of death when the Xbox was first released? This cost Microsoft $1.15 billion. Think of that when you're planning your reliability testing. You're now a real company with lots of employees, many of which will be new. So you need more process than when the entire company could have lunch together. And this is doubly true for a company with lots of people who work remotely. Process is not there to create friction, but to enable everyone to get things done consistently and correctly. Create SOPs for common tasks. If no one knows how to get reimbursed for an expense, creating an SOP that explains exactly how to do it correctly will save lots of time and effort and reduce errors. Go through every element of your operation and ask if it's running smoothly, and if not, ask if an SOP could solve the problem. Even some uncommon tasks that are critical should have SOPs. For instance, creating, reviewing, and releasing design documents should have an SOP. How much you outsource is probably the most important decision you will make at this stage. You can keep everything in-house, outsource just manufacturing to a contract manufacturer or a CM, or develop the product using a joint development model or JDM. I've seen all three work, and it depends greatly on what kind of company you want to build. One advantage of a JDM or a CM arrangement is that they can help with design for manufacturing, or DFM. If you're going to go with a JDM or a CM, you don't need to build as large of a team, but you're still accountable for the product. So hire people who can work with your partner to make sure you are shipping the product you want. If you're going to do manufacturing in-house, start building your manufacturing team now and have them provide input to the design. There are also some things like reliability testing that you'll probably want to outsource. If you haven't gotten a project management platform and a wiki yet, you'll need one now. Use your PM platform to track tasks and discuss issues around each task. Use your wiki for your SOPs and your meeting minutes. Doing this will make it much easier to onboard new people and manage when other people leave. In this chapter, documentation is your primary deliverable. All of your design documentation should be kept in a platform that gives you traceability and gives your tech lead a mechanism to approve changes. Less critical documentation like SOPs should be kept on your wiki, where it's easy to keep them alive with less friction and sufficient traceability. Don't count on Word and Excel documents exchanged via email. You end up with multiple versions and no one knows which is current. Some organizations keep these documents on a SharePoint site, but I have found that not to work as well as a wiki. I'm calling the third chapter Deploy, as you're focused on getting your solution out to market. Looking at the sample 6-phase project, phase 6 is where you're focused on manufacturing, sales, support, and distribution. In terms of schedule and budget, it's by far the largest. But at the end of phase 5, you demonstrated you have a solid design and know how to build it. You've raised the money needed to ramp up, and it's just go, go, go. From the first chapter, you know you have a product customers want. And from the second chapter, you know you have a product that can work. Now you just need to get that product out to customers. That's the focus of the Deploy chapter. You need to ramp up manufacturing, prove that the product you're building at scale performs as well as your design is capable of and is robust, and get it out to paying customers. You also need a support system that can answer customers' questions and repair broken units. You're now a grown-up company, shipping products, and your processes need to reflect that. Every step in the manufacturing and support process must be documented in an SOP, and any defects need to be tracked, reviewed, and resolved. I once worked for a company that didn't track defects, and they had all sorts of problems that didn't get resolved for years after they should have. You made your most important outsourcing decision in the design chapter, whether to use a CM, a JDM, or in-house production. Now you should consider whether to outsource some or all of your support system. For instance, you might outsource a call center, but keep repairs in-house. You should have built a robust communication system and culture during the design chapter. So you should just do a check-in now to make sure things are working. This is especially important with any external partners. Like communication, you should have set up your documentation system during the design chapter. You'll need to include manufactured and service documentation like serial numbers, build dates, and firmware installed. At this point, you also want to confirm that design changes quickly and accurately make it to the manufacturing floor. Again, what I presented here is not a checklist, but a way of thinking that you can apply across all the disciplines and not just the ones I talked about here. It's also important to understand that your company might want to mature more quickly than is described here. I can't think of any reason to mature more slowly, but I can think of several good reasons to grow up faster, especially if you're in a highly regulated field like medical devices or aviation. I've worked at companies that have been around for years and have shipped products, but are still in the define chapter as far as maturity goes. And due to this, I saw projects stall because of insufficient resources or fail because of bad communications. These companies were highly siloed, and decision-making was done by just a few people without all of the information they needed to make informed decisions. And bringing in just a bit of process made a world of difference. I took over one project that was stalled, and we made more progress in just a few months than in the previous 2 years by creating a clear specification and task tracking. A little structure can go a long way. If you've learned anything, please like and subscribe, and share this video with anyone you think would benefit from it. If you can think of a time when the lack of maturity caused you some grief, please share that and any other thoughts you have in the comments. Thanks.